In this episode, you'll hear from a police officer who killed someone in the line of duty. Most police officers go their entire careers without ever having to use lethal force on a suspect. My guest today is the exception. I'm John. I'm an actual 911 dispatcher, and I'm a trained hostage negotiator. On the condition of his anonymity, my guest today has agreed to say what it was like to be called to a dangerous scene, spiraling out of control, the attempts that were made to de-escalate that situation, and the biggest decision of his life, to pull the trigger. And that's only the beginning of the story.
Wake up, America. It's the Comm Center. Make sure you hit like and subscribe for more content just like this.
All right, I'm being joined today by a police officer who worked at a larger agency on the West Coast. A couple of years ago, this officer was called to the scene of a critical incident, and he did what most police officers are never asked to do, which means he had to use lethal force against a suspect that resulted in that suspect passing away. For obvious reasons, he's maintaining a little bit of anonymity here, and we're going to respect that. But can you tell me, in your own words, tell me what happened? What was the call for service about? How did it feel going out there? You know, what exactly happened?
So it started as your average domestic violence call. It was, somebody called in saying they were hearing a fight, an argument, sounded verbal, maybe physical. And I looked up some history from the address, and there had been a lot of calls there that were basically resolved as what amounts to a domestic violence call, but no crime was committed. So this was an address that was not an unusual one for us to go to. I hadn't personally been there, but this was not an out of the norm call at all.
So you're saying like normally it's just verbal disputes there, but there was no prior arrest history?
Correct.
How did it escalate to the point where force was needed from you?
So we got there and we approached the door. It was an apartment complex. We approached the door and everything was quiet when we arrived. Knocked at the door, nobody came to the door. We looked in, and I could see a male figure on the floor, completely naked, which is a little odd. So at that point, we were like, we just need to make sure everybody's okay. So we woke him up by pounding on the door, announcing that we were the police. He went out of our sight and came back into a sight with a rifle in his hands.
That's got to be pretty terrifying. I mean, what were you thinking with passing out, being nude, that he's under the influence of something, or?
Yep, that was the thought. Whether it be alcohol or drugs, the immediate thought was that he, especially when we were able to rouse him, that he was probably under the influence of alcohol. Was my initial thought. So he didn't come right to the door. He wasn't pointing the rifle at the windows, so we backed away, went down to our cars, and started to get more people there.
And really, if he's got a rifle, those have high velocity rounds in it. You're not even necessarily safe at your car, right? Let alone the rest of the neighborhood if he starts just popping off rounds. And he could fire through the dwelling, outside into your car, or into passersby, other people, collateral damage in the neighborhood. And because he's inside his house, you wouldn't necessarily even be able to fire back. Do I understand the tactics of the situation well? Or if I don't, dial it in?
No, that is 100% correct. But at the same time, we're not just going to leave the situation because now we've got somebody with a rifle. We don't know where the other part of the domestic dispute is. And so we just wanted to create some space. He came to the door and was yelling out the door at first, but then closed it. I went down. I'm a rifle operator I was for the agency I was working for at the time. And so I got my rifle out. We got to, have our options to be as safe as possible, meet force with force if needed. And he ended up coming out with nothing in his hands at first. So we were trying to talk to him, get him to come down. He was on the second story of the apartment complex. So he was up on above some stairs on like a balcony. And we were just trying to talk to him, trying to get him to come down because we didn't want to work our way up there. He goes right inside the door, and then, we're face to face in this situation with a person with a rifle. So We're talking to him for a while. Eventually, he goes back in and comes back out with the rifle in hand. Still wasn't pointing it at the time. We're getting more people into the area. He starts saying all sorts of stuff about, time overseas, things he's done, making threats to us. Turns out in the end, he actually wasn't even a veteran. He went to basic, and while at basic, he got kicked out.
As a 911 dispatcher, somebody who would have sent you to the scene, I guess one question that I would have had, is anybody else inside that apartment? Is this a true hostage situation, or is it more of a barricaded subject?
So at that point, we're trying to figure that out. We, at some point, the other half of the domestic dispute did come up to us from outside. So she had already exited. Apparently, there were kids in the apartment. She had taken the kids with her. So at this point, we've got, we're trying to figure out if a crime was committed, a domestic violence crime was committed, in which case there are, mandatory arrest statutes. But if not, we still have a person who appears to be very intoxicated, who is waving around a rifle, still, can be a danger to anybody in the area. So we ended up getting somebody there that was trying to talk to him. We had crisis intervention training, so we had somebody specifically talking to him. He was
Over a
yelling
loudspeaker?
It was partially over a loudspeaker at times and partially not. So,
Okay. Was a phone the other option then that you were using?
No. We were just close enough that
Okay.
you could yell, you could hear, and this guy, I could be talking to the person next to me and thinking that we were saying something that this guy couldn't hear, and he'd repeat back to me what I said. So he was hearing everything just fine, even if I was just talking normal, which actually was quite surprising.
By the book, we say that you should never negotiate face to face, but I think that that's just totally unrealistic in a real world situation. You're going to be encountering people, like your situation on a balcony. But we talked sometimes about barriers to communication. You mentioned the physical barrier with him possibly not being able to hear you, but I think there's also a barrier to effective communication when someone's standing up on a balcony and talking to you, because the balcony might kind of become a stage and he realizes he's the center of attention. Did you get any kind of impression that kind of psychology might have been in play?
Oh, he definitely knew that everybody was watching him, and his statements he was making were very, I'm in charge here kind of thing. And
the truth is, with a gun and with potential innocent lives to be lost, I mean, we should understand the situation that he really was in charge, wasn't he? Would you say that he was, and that the fact that you have a rifle is that you're attempting to take back control of that situation?
Oh, yes, 100%.
That's something that I think that the public doesn't understand about a barricaded subject or, an armed standoff, is that the suspect really does have control over that situation. The police can escalate that to take that back, but the hope is that everyone will just calm down, that he'll voluntarily give up his weapon and come into custody so that you guys can talk about things. But the suspect with a gun really is in charge of that situation until that situation changes. So what happened next?
So, like you were saying, we were trying to de-escalate the situation. He had a lot of opportunity to actually, put down the gun, to not escalate things further. He went back in the apartment, came outside with the gun in one hand and a knife in the other hand. So now, we're thinking about options. He's got a stairwell right by him, so even if he decides not to use the rifle, he could come down the stairwell and come at us with a knife. We're getting other options there as far as non-lethal force. We had a 40 millimeter, less lethal. But
what kind of rounds does that fire?
So they're like it's like a Nerf gun on steroids. So it's a sponge round, a foam round, but they come out at high velocity. But they're only effective to a certain range. And I even had conversations with the officer next to me about how, at the height he was, the distance he was, if we were to use that on him to try to get him to drop the rifle, one, we couldn't make it there in time to actually affect any change. If he did drop it, he could just pick it right back up because we had to go around cars, up a stairwell. Two, there's a good chance that it would just piss him off. And we didn't want to force, the ultimate situation to come around where we ended up doing something that forced him to make a decision to.
The thinking usually is that time is on your side, that the longer it goes on, that someone will calm down if there's something in their system that will work out of their system, that they'll get tired, that they'll have physical needs that need to be met, whether that's sleep or going to the bathroom or being hungry or thirsty, that those things can kind of actually wear down a person to make them want to disengage with the police and make them more compliant. So yeah, you try not to force that. I take it because he was outside, and although you are letting him just kind of vent and maybe get some things off his chest to help him de-escalate, I take it that chemicals were also not really an option for you.
No. There was, we don't have them on the street level, and we didn't have our SWAT team available to come out and do it because this all happened from beginning to end in a matter of just over half an hour.
So what happened next?
So at some point, he actually raises it up and pulls the trigger on this rifle. And at that point, he kept saying that it was a he kept calling it a break barrel. He said it was a break barrel, and I didn't know at this point because he's saying break barrel, he's going to shoot us, all these things. Wife starts saying that it was a 22 air rifle. I don't know if you have much experience with pellet guns that are like more the air rifle style break barrel kind.
No.
So they are used oftentimes. My folks actually have one, so I have direct experience with them. They're used to kill small game. They can be used to kill anything up to even like small deer, so stuff like that. It's a pellet gun, but the rounds come out at a very high velocity. So this thing at this point, I'm thinking, because he fires in the air, it's not very loud, but it's got something on the end of it that looks like it could be a suppressor. So I'm thinking it might be either a 22 rifle, stereotypical gunpowder in the cartridge, or it's a air rifle. Either way, I know the damage a pellet gun can do, an air rifle can do, and so either way, it's a deadly threat to us.
All right.
So he fires in the air.
When he pulled the trigger, he did fire off a round, though. He wasn't just trying to intimidate you then?
Correct. He fired it off into the air.
Okay.
And then he broke the barrel. So to load it, it's a single shot rifle. You break the barrel, and that's where you load. Whether it's a bullet or it's a pellet, you load it right into the end of the barrel. So like a breech load.
Okay, so that's a moment of incredible tactical vulnerability, though. At least he's not staring you down with something that's got a magazine in it where he could fire off round after round at you.
Right. So it gave me a little bit more. As I was watching him, the barrel was in the open position, and as long as he didn't load anything back into it, I know that even if he closes it, there's nothing in there. There's nothing that's going to hurt us. So it gives us a little bit more ability to hopefully allow time to do what you were just talking about, where time can de-escalate a situation oftentimes. And but at this time, he's still, he's got the rifle, he's still got the knife, so we can't just approach the guy. After a while, he goes back in the apartment again and comes back out, and the rifle is back in its ready position. So the barrel is back to where it looks like, straight barrel on a rifle.
So was he temporarily out of sight? Did you have to assume that maybe he reloaded, or what exactly happened there?
That's exactly right. He was out of sight for a couple of minutes. And so the assumption was that he went back in and reloaded. And in fact, that's actually what he did. So he came back out, and negotiations started again, trying to talk to this guy, trying to get him to just put down the rifle, put down the knife, and come on down to us, and we'd take care of this. And it got to the point where eventually he made a statement, and it was something to the effect of, well, okay. And so there was something in the tone of his voice that I knew that he had reached his limit. And I
His
was watching.
resignation. He was committed to his plan, whatever that was.
Yep. And so I was watching him, had my rifle up, and I was watching him, and I saw him put the butt of the rifle to his shoulder and start lifting it up right in my direction. And so that's when I fired one shot.
What happened next?
I watched him go down, and I didn't see him moving again. I knew that we had to attempt to, give him medical aid. So there was a quick plan by other officers to go up, take lethal cover with them, and go up and try to administer medical aid. And once they were past me, then I was out of it. I was no longer the lethal cover on the situation. And so they took care of that from there. I backed off, went and started the whole process of sitting in a car and waiting.
So I'm actually more interested in what happened to you than this guy. I assume that he passed away. He didn't.
He did. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where probably the news took over, and they would want to tell his story, and without going too deeply into it. I don't root for death. We say that on the Comm Center a lot, that it's never a favorable outcome. As a negotiator, you always want to preserve as much life as possible. But if you've heard me say anything on any of my shows, I've always said that you can have sympathy for people who are in crisis, whether it's manufactured by drugs or it's a real problem in their lives. But people demonize the police. They criticize the police response despite having no training, despite not having to be in that situation, not having to face the liability that would have come with simply packing it in and leaving the scene with a dangerous homicidal, suicidal person with a gun who is intoxicated. You guys get called to a situation that you don't want to be at. I'm sure that you could have thought of other things that you wanted to be doing that night. Sitting in a car, watching YouTube is kind of what I always go to. So after you were excused from the scene and they're attending to him, I guess just take me through whatever happened to you, whatever people said to you, whatever you thought, what you did with your weapon. Was that put into evidence? What happened after that?
So first, they take you and they put you in a car with another officer. And you're told, don't talk about what happened. Don't talk about what you did. Don't talk about anything related to this call. And you wait. Eventually, all the people that you work with on the regular walking around the car are doing the job of the police, what I normally do. And you sit and you look at them, you watch them as they walk around, and you try to figure out, okay, now what's my place here? I had, my sergeants there that I'd normally chat with on a regular basis on any call, and they couldn't talk to me, couldn't say anything. Eventually, they get the lawyer, so I got an attorney for this, and they show up there and they say, all right, take me through what happened. Talk to the lawyer. Okay, so you go through that from beginning to end, as much detail as you can. In the meantime, everybody's showing up. You got the detectives, you got everybody coming out to investigate a officer use of lethal force. And you got the chief showing up, you got the union president showing up, and you're just watching it all unfold around you. And I'm just sitting there talking to my lawyer. So go through that with my lawyer, and when the detectives are ready, we got to go out and you got to go in there. You're not going to say anything, and they're going to photograph you front and back exactly how you were. Going to take your rifle, and in front of you, they're going to do a round count to make sure that what you said you shot is what you actually shot, and there's no bullets missing and nothing like that. And so they did a round count. I believe they even did a round count of my pistol, even though that wasn't used. The pistol I got back, the rifle they took as evidence, and they send you back to the car until you're ready to go. You know, you walk by the chief, and yeah, I'm really sorry this happened to you. Let me know if you need anything, which, you know, all the platitudes. And then after a while, they say, okay, yeah, you're going to go back to the precinct. If you want to ride home, we'll get you a ride home. We'll deal with getting your car later. And sign this form that says that you can't talk to anybody except for your spouse, clergy, your attorney, that kind of thing. And be back here in, I think it was less than 36 hours, and you'll have your interview with IA to start the IA portion of this, to make sure that not only was this legal, but you didn't violate any policies.
So I guess I kind of want to go back to that moment in the car. For me, that's so far the most vivid description of anything you've told me about. I mean, we all kind of we've seen the videos of the standoff and the officer taking the shot, but that moment when you're in the back of the car and all of a sudden you're essentially at the scene, you're no longer a police officer. You're seeing people walk around, processing the scene, maintaining the perimeter, talking to each other, making phone calls, doing all the things that they do, and you're sitting in the back. And your gun's taken away from you, which is a huge part of being a police officer, is carrying that with you and being photographed. I mean, you had to have felt like a criminal suspect, right?
Oh, you totally do. Yeah.
What's that like, going from a police officer doing his duty to protect the life and safety of the community, and 30 seconds later, you're in the back of the car like you'd done something awful?
Well, thankfully I wasn't like in the back of the car, like in the cage portion. That would be real bad. But it is a weird situation to go from, you know, I'd go to calls like this that ended differently, and I'd run the call, and I'd be, you know, the person out there taking care of everything, and to all of a sudden be like, okay, now you have to sit back and watch as your fate unfolds before you. It's very unnerving to go from, you know, feeling like one of the people that's out there helping to, you know, what's my future going to look like? And like you said, the photographs, the round count, the everything, you just feel like, okay, you're the suspect here.
You went from being someone who's normally totally in control of the situation to being all of a sudden sitting in that car being out of control. That must have just felt terrible.
Yeah. No,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, not recommended at all. Not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I know they said that you could only talk to your spouse, you could only talk to clergy, you could only talk to your attorney prior to this investigation or this interview that you were going to have with Internal Affairs. How did it feel? I mean, in some ways, you're prohibited from talking to the other people who work a shift with you, or your fellow, you know, the cops that you're going to go out and have a beer with. You knew that you couldn't talk to them, but did you sense anything, or did you feel anything different? Did you feel like they didn't want to talk to you, or that they did want to talk to you and they couldn't? Like, you know, how did it affect the other officers that knew you well, and what was it like not being able to talk to them?
Oh, I definitely knew they wanted to talk to me. But it's a weird thing that all of a sudden, not only are people not talking to you, aside from you okay, it is because they don't want any look of impropriety. They don't want it to look like we're talking. Then you don't only not get, you know, to talk to them. There seems to be this avoiding of even eye contact, which is real weird. It's like the people that after any big call, I'd go and we'd debrief it together. Now all of a sudden, I'm it looks like it almost feels like in a way that they're avoiding eye contact, kind of like, oh, I'm disappointed in the decision that you made, is kind of what it feels like in the moment.
Like shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
That had to be pretty awful. And I can only speak from my experience, which is not really at all the same as yours, but I think maybe there's some similarities there. So you could talk to your clergy, you could talk to your wife, you could talk to an attorney, I guess. That's something you need to do. But when you go through something like this, then the number one people you want to talk to are the people who understand your job the most, which are these cops who are now avoiding you and giving you sideways glances, looking away from you when you're in the hallway. That must have really taken away a lot of the support that you probably needed at a critical moment in your life.
Yeah, it definitely does. And the sideways glances wasn't everybody, and it didn't last forever. But at that very moment, when it's one of the biggest kind of pivotal moments in my life, as far as a big decision that I made that could have everlasting effects on my life, my family, everything. It was like having the rug pulled out from under you. You don't even know how to react to any of it.
Yeah. Did it feel generally like people had your back? Did you feel like there was support there? You mentioned earlier the chief was there with some platitudes. Did you really feel, when it comes to your department, did you feel alone, or did you feel like they had your support, or did you feel like they were waiting to make up their mind? Like they're going to have your back, pending the outcome of the IA investigation. How did that feel?
From the people that were directly around me, the people that I worked every day, I knew that I'd have their support. Anybody above that, I didn't know. You get the platitudes from the chief, but you know that the chief's gonna do what is best to make the agency look good. And yeah. And so these platitudes, it was almost like I almost felt like, okay, if that's all I'm getting, I would have rather talked to my coworkers, direct coworkers, than even see anybody above sergeant rank.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you what the cutoff for you was when people stop being police officers and start being administrators. I always said lieutenant, and I remember telling a captain once, he confronted me once about why I did not apply for lieutenant, and I think that moment kind of sealed my fate. But it's interesting that I think that's common, that the sergeant's the one who's on your shift with you and making decisions with you, and the lieutenant's the one you have to talk to the next day. How did it feel to be under prolonged scrutiny from IA? What was that investigation like? Did they treat you fairly? Did you feel like they treated you with more scrutiny than a typical suspect, or what did it feel like to be under investigation by IA?
So you go in for your initial interview, and it lasted a couple hours. You go in, answer a few questions, then you get to watch your body cam footage, because I hadn't watched that yet. And then you go back in, and after you've watched your body cam footage, they go through the rest of the interview. It's a couple hours long. I felt like that day went okay, but then the next, week, months, turned out to be multiple months go by, and you don't hear anything. You start to hear, random things about what's being said, but you don't hear anything from them. You don't get any sort of closure. This whole time, at least for the department that I worked for, the gag order, so the don't talk to anybody, lasts all the way up until you are criminally cleared. So that is, don't talk to the people that you were on this call with. Don't talk to them about the call for as long as it takes for you to be criminally cleared, which in my case ended up being 9 months.
Don't you think that's kind of a long time? We recently covered a case on Comm Center where there was an active shooter in downtown Austin. Police officers responded to the scene within 30 seconds. They had to take the same action that you did, where they pointed a pistol, squeezed the trigger and knocked him down. And it seemed like at the press conference the next day, the DA in Austin was saying these guys are heroes. They did exactly the right thing. When you see that happening in Austin, how does that make you feel when you had to suffer 9 months to essentially reach the same conclusion that you were heroic and that you did the right thing?
Pretty terrible. Pretty terrible. And especially when partway through that 9 months, you start hearing that I may have to go in for another IA interview, which I didn't, thankfully. But because the chief's office is thinking, well, this person wasn't the only person on scene with a rifle, but they're the only one that actually took a shot. So they must have done something wrong and made a mistake. When you start to hear that, then it it doesn't feel good. It doesn't give you any hope for a good outcome, even if you're criminally cleared. That now they're all of a sudden the chief's office is like, oh well, he's the only person that did this, even though other people had the option. So maybe this is on the officer.
Yeah, which means they would fire you. You'd be open up to all kinds of lawsuits, and your life is still going to be hell for years, even if charges never come, criminal charges.
Right, exactly.
That's awful, and I don't want to skate past that because 9 months is a long time to wake up every day with a knot in your stomach and a lot of nights not being able to fall asleep and wondering what your future is going to be. Because yeah, I think that would be hard for a single guy, but I mean, you're a family man, and they're all going through that with you. I'll ask you about your family in a minute. But what kind of duties did they have you do during this 9 months? That kind of on the outside to people like me, we hear like, oh, you had a desk duty or something, or you were punished with sitting in the comm center. What happened with you those 9 months?
They said stay home.
Really, you were at home that entire time?
The entire time. They said,
what did that do to your confidence as a police officer when you're hearing that you did something that no one else did, and now they don't even have you running background checks for pistol permits or something or whatever? They don't have you working in the records section. They don't have you doing anything helpful at work. Like, you must have felt banished.
oh, it's isolation. It's not good. It's not good for anybody. And I even came to the point, I'm a pretty positive guy. Everybody around me will tell you that I'm, for the most part, a real positive guy. And it got to the point where my wife looked at me one day, and I had told her from the beginning, hey, you're going to be the one that tells me if you're seeing something different in me that I need to address, because I don't want to become somebody who's unbearable to live with or whatever. And she came to me one day and said, you know what, you're getting negative.
Wow.
And that hit me pretty good. So I immediately got on my phone and I texted my therapist, and I'm like, hey, I need to come in. I need help.
Yeah, that's something that's really changed a lot in the last 30 years of policing. I'm sure that Drew could tell you that the idea of a police officer speaking openly about talking to a therapist is pretty unusual, but I guess I commend you for that. I was going to ask you, what you were doing for your mental health. A typical answer from a cop would be, well, I'm working out every day, and I guess doing the things that I like to do, whatever those things are. But I guess I'm glad that you got that help, and I'm just sorry that that you were cut off from everything. We talked to a dispatcher once on the Comm Center who admitted to the sheriff that she was having some problems with suicidal ideation. He immediately fired her right on the spot. And so, like, dispatchers, just like police officers, and this can be seen as a good thing or a bad thing, but we gather a lot of identity from what we do. We get a lot of our focus and a lot of our guiding principles, our guiding force, our reason to get up in the day is to make a difference in what in the world with what we do. And we're often defined by that because we have struggles that no one else gets. Police officers certainly go through things that no one else can understand, and dispatchers, we go through things that no one else can understand either. What binds us together, obviously, is our mutual hatred of firefighters.
Absolutely.
But when that's cut out from underneath you, you lost your sense of control at the scene. You lose your sense of identity when you're being photographed and you have your firearm taken, and now you have nothing to do but face all those empty hours of wondering what's going to happen to you. I just really wanted to really, I guess, not dismiss those terrible 9 months where you had to wonder what was happening, what was going on in the media at the time. I'm sure an officer involved shooting at least made the 11 o'clock news, but was it a high profile case? Is it something that went on for a long time? Were there calls for justice for the man that you shot, or was it kind of one of these more quiet things, or what happened?
No, mine was quiet. It was, one press release after it happened, and then one press release when they released the body cam footage, and that was it. That was it. The For how much scrutiny I felt like I was getting, it was a flash in the pan as far as the media was concerned. And so to have that from that side, where this isn't a high profile case, it's not got everybody looking at it going, this cop, we got to get him. It
Mhm.
felt like all that was just coming internally instead.
Which has actually got to feel worse because the ideal situation would be is that all the cops in the department, the chief, everybody has your back against the world, but the world didn't seem to be knocking down your door. It just seemed to be the department. Does it normally take 9 months to clear someone of a shooting? Like if we had somebody who was woken up in the middle of the night to a burglar coming in their house and he defended his home with a firearm and shot somebody, that wouldn't necessarily take 9 months to clear him, would it?
No, absolutely not. It is typically a much faster process. And even our department, so when I got hired, it was, you're looking at 6 weeks probably. It slowly got longer and longer, and then the officer involved shootings before me, were anywhere from 4 to 6 months, which is still a long time. But then mine was 9 months, and it was crazy.
Did modern politics of the time make you feel like the rug could be pulled out from underneath you? I know we have talked about a lot of other police officers on the shows that I've been on. We talked about a guy named Ben Darby who went into a house and was forced to use uh, um, his firearm to stop a dangerous subject. He was cleared. There were no charges pressed, and then the DA changed over in Alabama, and then he was subsequently arrested in order to make that DA look good. There was a guy named Matthew Mistretta in Michigan where he performed a felony stop on someone that was leaving the scene of a homicide, and they got him jammed up on fake excessive force charges, even though he was one officer by himself taking down two guys and looking like an utter badass while it was happening. Did you feel like maybe the cards were stacked against you, and it didn't matter if you did everything right, that the politics of the time were going to prevail, and it didn't matter what the case law was, and it didn't matter what the precedents were, and it didn't matter what policy was, that some kind of pressure to politics was going to make you a sacrificial lamb?
It definitely crossed my mind. And the longer that it took to get us to a resolution, the more I had to kind of keep that at bay. And, uh, the area that I worked in is pretty known for definitely not a love of the police, we'll say. And so, you know, I know that they were going to take my case to grand jury, which means that the citizens of the city that I worked in were going to be on this grand jury and decide whether or not to indict me. And so it definitely crossed my mind, but I tried to keep that at bay as much as possible, mostly because it also really, that was a big thing for my wife, was like, yes, we know you did the right thing, but what if? You
Right.
still have to go in and, lay out all this evidence in front of the citizens, and what if? And that was always, for that whole time, was in the back of my mind, is, you know what? I know I did what I needed to do, but what if I get the bad group of people that's like, you know what, we don't really care about the facts, and they indict me, and then I got to go through that whole process, and I got to go and I got to get a mugshot, and I got to get booked at jail and all this stuff. So it's definitely in the back of my mind that whole time.
I think it's even scarier than really what you're letting on. What most people maybe don't know about a grand jury, what the prosecution does is they present
some evidence to a jury and they say, is this enough to go to trial? Do we have enough evidence here in order to proceed criminally against this defendant? And I almost think that there's a certain amount of bias built into it because, especially if you're like me and you have a really bad attitude when it comes to civic participation, you feel like you get called down to the courthouse and you're doing this thing and someone's showing you some evidence. And I think you almost have to justify your presence there by saying, yes, I'm voting for indictment on this. And so the idea or the news that you would have been indicted, that would have just come out of nowhere, right?
I did testify at the grand jury.
Did you? Okay,
So
well, that's good to hear.
I did not have a lawyer with me in the room.
Okay.
So I had the opportunity. I could have declined to testify, but I thought in my case it was best for me to tell my story. But yeah, I did testify, but it still felt like, that especially our city went through a DA change, like pretty close to the beginning of the whole process, and there was just so much uncertainty that I didn't know what was going to happen in the end, even if I testified, even if I told my story. And, especially people don't tend to think about a pellet gun when they say pellet gun. And they don't look at an actual air rifle and what it's capable of. They think Red Ryder BB gun, you'll shoot your eye out, that
Right.
kind of thing. And so I didn't know what people would think of that and would be able to, whether or not they'd be able to understand the danger that still poses. So it was just all a big question mark. And it just felt like the whole process was, put there to, like you said, say, well, we'll give them the opportunity to see if they want to indict him.
I think you make a great point about being nervous about the jury not understanding the potential lethality of the air rifle. I know that a lot of people don't understand. You'll read this in comment sections on any body cam video gets posted, but someone charging at a police officer with a knife and the officer shoots them, and they'll be like, why did you shoot him? He only had a knife. I think President Biden was famous for saying, why didn't you only shoot this guy in the leg? I mean, they literally have no understanding of, first of all, how lethal it is to be stabbed, how fast you could be stabbed, how you're backtracking when someone's charging you. But without getting off too much on what it means to be charged with a knife, although this guy did have one, just generally, people just don't understand what it's like to be in that lethal situation at all, do they?
No, it is, while the whole situation took, a little over half an hour, the decision that had to be made had to be made in just a fraction of a second. And yeah, I had already made the calculations in my head as far as, where my, line in the sand was, as you say. But the actual decision was an instantaneous decision that you had to make, and you got to live with that. And I don't think people understand at all what it is to not only have to make the right decision, but to, on a daily basis, to have to make that right decision at every call you go to, every, 20 times a day that you go to a call, and you got to make that right decision. And this was the actual, big decision, and you better make it right this time. And at this time, everything's on the line.
That moment when you're looking down your sights, your optic at the suspect, you decided what the line in the sand is, and you decided what it's going to take for you to squeeze that trigger and end the danger of the situation. Was that the most critical moment for you, or was that just the first of many? Did you have more, I guess, most critical moments in the 9 months that happened after that, between then when you were cleared? What was the worst part for you? The moment of decision, or was it some time when you were reflecting back on it?
Oh, I'd say, that was the first of many. That is a big decision. And, you hear about all these things happening when you're in a situation like this. They talk about time dilation and whatnot. And I'd fired my rifle multiple times, tons of times, at the range and whatnot. Never once had I noticed the puff of smoke coming out at the end and the brass ejecting and flying through the air. I could see
Wow.
that. I could see that clear as day after it happened. It just happened so slowly. So that was the first big moment. And then I guess the next one was going home and trying to sleep, trying to turn off your brain and trying to get some sleep between that event and when you got to go in and talk to IA. That I'd say that IA was the next moment. What am I going to face when I go in here and talk to IA? And then it just, from then on, it was just trying to keep yourself in a more positive light for what ended up being 9 months. As you're going every day, you're going, well, will I hear anything today? What does it mean that this is taking so long? What is going on behind the scenes that I don't know? Am I going to get blindsided with something? So it wasn't like from then on, it wasn't like a specific moment that I could point to, but it was just ongoing, being in the dark and not knowing anything. That was the hard thing.
With the chief or the gossip or whatever it is you heard about how you were the only one that took a shot, you were the only one that saw something, you were the only one that made this decision. 9 months is a long time, especially when you have nothing to do other than think about it. Did you ever have a moment where you doubted yourself? Did you ever have a moment where you weren't sure if this was the right thing, or did you stay pretty convicted in knowing that you did the right thing the entire time?
No, I knew from the pull of the trigger, and I never doubted whether or not I made the right decision. It wasn't a decision that, people have this idea that cops go out there and we want this situation to come up. We want to be the person that goes out there and takes that shot. But that's really not the case. I knew I did the right thing. I don't regret what I did. I regret that it had to happen. And I wish that it didn't have to happen. But I never doubted myself, never doubted my decision making.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm not the kind of person that can go 9 months without doubting myself, particularly when I'm waiting to hear a word from someone and gossip is flying around. I think I'm maybe more prone to a little bit more self-doubt than you are. You mentioned that your wife told you at one point that you were getting negative, maybe a little bit difficult to live with. Doesn't help that you're at home all the time. They never get a break from you. How did it affect your family? I mean, your whole family dynamic, first of all, is thrown off just because you're home all the time. Everyone's got a routine, and now you're a part of that. And, just being always there, never getting a break. But then for 9 months, things are out of your control and you're kind of spiraling to a negative space. How did it affect them? I think that's something that no one ever talks about. What was it like for Derek Chauvin's mom? Well, nobody cares enough to ask Derek Chauvin's mom, but I want to know, how did this affect all of your family?
Yeah, that's very true that nobody really talks about that. And, for the first bit, I think they all enjoyed having me home. I mean, I was home more than normal, and that was good. But I think that, like I said, my wife started to really worry as it took longer and longer that, what if we go back and then they decide to indict you? So the longer it takes, the more that they worry too. And that was the big one with my wife was like, yeah, we know you did the right thing, but what if? And to have to live with that for so long was something that really weighed on her. My kids seem to do okay for the most part. They had to get used to dad being around constantly, which I can be good and can be bad. But well, I am kind of, stuck on my own property. Well, even they're off at school and I'm by myself and my wife is working, and I'm wondering what to do with myself. And then I'm getting into this negative headspace. I'm sure for a while I wasn't, super fun to deal with. Wasn't real fun to have around. And thankfully, like I said, my wife was good about talking to me, and it was pretty proactive about, working with that. But still, you get in this rut, and I just I wasn't myself. It's hard to be yourself when you are stuck with yourself and doing, you don't have your own routine. You don't have, and I tried to do all the things that everybody says, I worked out and all this stuff, but when you're missing that big component of your life that, I've always loved my job. I still love my job. And that gets pulled out from under you. It is hard to keep positive for so long. And, I know my wife doesn't normally bring stuff like that up. And so I know that it was obvious to her that something was off with me. So it definitely affected her. And then, my kids were probably like, all right, Dad, when are you going back to work? we, we, we like having you home, but we also like, when you're more positive. So, that's something that, they never really brought up, but I'm sure it weighed on them as well.
I guess I don't really want you to speak on this because I feel like it's too personal, but I think there's a big myth that when people are going through stressful times like this, the family comes together, the family rallies around, the family supports you. And although that can be true, the truth is that tough times like this, I think back in my own life, deaths in the family, stress actually can bring out the worst in people sometimes. And police officers tend to get divorced. They tend to have very tough time managing work life and family life. And you were, even though you were not at work, you were having to manage both. So I think that that's something else that you had to bear for 9 months, was just taking care of your family in the way that you had to do it and keeping everything together. And I'm not someone that can be positive for a full 8 hours. I could go to work and I could feel positive going in there, like, let's do the Lord's work. And then, by the time I take a 911 call because someone wants to know if they should inform the FBI if they've been asked to join a gang, I'm out. I'm not feeling positive anymore. When someone dials 911 because horses don't have shade, I'm officially not feeling. I might not be feeling the most negative, but I'm not feeling positive anymore. But if you don't mind sharing, you mentioned therapy. You mentioned that you were getting some support from your family. But what was it that you would say that got you through it? If there was any one thing that did it, you mentioned that you did exercise and some things that helped you, but what was your main source of support, or what brought you back from the worst part?
My family was huge. I mean, I can't even. They were so supportive. Anything I needed, they were huge. So I'd say they're the biggest thing. But if you're looking for something outside of family, I like I said, I went and I spoke to a therapist, and big thing for me was I was in a rut and I needed to get out of that rut. So I needed to go do things, which, when you are the personality that typically does this job, uh, you don't tend to reach out to people as much as we probably could. And while I had some coworkers, some friends who would call me up and say, "Hey, let's get together," and that was great, and it happened more at the beginning. I can't expect people to, be doing that for 9 months on end. They've got lives too. So it became more about me getting out of my routine, whether that be going and just going out, go on a hike, or go on, whatever it may be, something to get me out of the house. Because being in the house, we've got a little bit of property. There's always stuff to do, but you just get in your own head for that long. So the big thing, especially after I talked to the therapist, was he was like, "What are you doing for yourself? What are you doing that is intentional and outside of your rut?" And that was a big thing for me. And that is something that I think that, departments can do better, is they leave you out there. And I know there are a lot of organizations that do things for cops who have gone through stuff like this, whether they be, go to this cabin and with this group of people and do this, or go out fly fishing, or go whatever. There's a lot of organizations that do that, but I am not, And I know most other cops that I know of are not the ones that are the ones to reach out and say, hey, I know you do this. How about you do it for me? It just feels weird.
You don't want to
And
feel like a charity case. Yeah.
right, right. So, and I even tried to, I talked to, after I went back, I talked to, the EAP people, and they're like, what could we have done better? And I told them, I said, these places are out there, build relationships with them. And when you have people go through this, bring it to the people and say, hey, we've got this and it's all set up, and we would like to send you to this, because I am not going to be the one that goes out and says, hey, I know you do this. Uh, I want to be taken care of. And so I think that would be, a huge thing that departments could even do just to support their people.
I don't know about you, but if I was at home all the time, I would feel like I was on house arrest. I would feel like I was being punished.
Oh yeah.
Even without the monitor around your ankle, just being home all the time would feel punishment. And especially, the decompression. You're going out there, and I know it's just your bread and butter to be a police officer, but there is some exciting stuff. I mean, some certain shifts you go to work, and especially when you're feeling amped up, it's not that you want anything bad to happen, that you're ready for it. And that takes a certain psychological state of mind to be prepared to get into a gunfight, get into a chase, or whatever's going to happen to you. And then just to have all the responsibility taken off of your plate, and for me, it would feel the same thing as if I was already sentenced, even though it was in the comfort of my own home.
Yep.
I feel weirdly about employee assistance programs, just because those are typically a function of your job and something you get referred to by HR. And like most people, I'm very anti-HR. I feel like HR is usually just trying to have enough papers on you that if they ever want to get rid of you, that they have enough legitimate reason to do it. So I
Yep.
guess I encourage you that if you're a police officer, a dispatcher, a firefighter even, I guess, but to take your mental health into your own hands. You don't have to rely on the employee assistance program. Most of those places are only going to give you a limited number of sessions anyway, which is going to give you enough time to unpack the fact that there's really something wrong, and then you don't
Yeah.
get to really fully address it. So I guess I commend you for that. Something that gets me through my bad times is my faith. I try to remember that everything bad that's going on in the world already has a positive outcome that's been assured. And it can be difficult sometimes to relate your problems and the things that you're going through and the things that you're feeling towards the ultimate second coming of Christ, and the fact that everything's going to be restored. And it can be hard to have your attitude changed by that faith. But I guess that's something that's worked for me when it comes to dealing with times of stress. What would you say to anybody who's going through that same thing? There's somebody out there right now who's going through their 9 months of exile from the police department, maybe doubting themselves, maybe going through a hard time. If there's some chance that they hear this, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, you bring up faith, and that's another big thing for me that helped get me through and helped me, come to the ultimate, conclusion that I was where I was supposed to be. I did what I was exactly the person that was right for that situation, and I was put there for a reason. And so, talking to people who are now going through this situation or will be going through this situation, you know, one thing I made sure I didn't do was anytime I was feeling down, I I'll have a drink occasionally, but I was like, anytime I'm feeling that, especially, I specifically made sure that, hey, I'm not gonna right now go to some sort of alcohol or something to make me feel better. Um, so that was a very conscious decision from the beginning. But on top of that, it's really, really hard. But sometimes, and if I did it again, I would have advocated more for myself. But you got to advocate for yourself, like you were saying. There are all these things that are put in place by departments to say, hey, we're taking care of our people, but they fail. They and they are very imperfect, and so you got to advocate for yourself and have a good group of people around you that will support you in that advocating. Be open with your family. One thing, like I said, when I told my wife from the beginning, I said, you got to be my barometer. You got to tell me if something is off. And she did. And I listened. And so instead of continuing that spiral, I was able to attack it head on. But the when it comes down to it, you have to advocate for yourself. And that's something that I think that looking back, I wish I had done more. There, like I said, these organizations that would have, been very great about saying, hey, we know you're going through this. And I would have had to come to them, but they would have, with open arms, welcomed me in. And if I had to do it again, I would, utilize those programs. There's no shame in saying, hey, you know what? I could use a little help in this time. I could use a little help to get me out of this. And there is no shame in that. You don't have to feel like, you're a charity case. That's what they're there for. And I wish that I had taken better advantage of that. But when it truly comes down to it, the core people around you and yourself, you got to advocate for yourself. But also, you mentioned faith. I mentioned faith. There is something about, having that to fall back on, to know that there is this, no matter what decision we've made, no matter what decision is made around us, we have this loving creator who's ultimately got everything in his hands. And no matter what happens, our ultimate fate is decided,
Yeah.
and there's something of a real comfort in that. So if you're not a person of faith, explore that. I think
Yeah.
it's a really good thing to push into.
Something that comes up in therapy is about, for me, is that, being a dispatcher and being a police officer, we're called to serve, we're called to wash people's feet. But we have this thing where we don't want to be on the receiving end of help. We're helpers, we help people, but we never really want that for ourselves. I don't know if that's a psychological thing, if it's an image thing that we view ourselves as people who help others. And so we kind of preclude ourselves from receiving help, whether it's from these programs or feeling like a charity case when our friends are trying to help get us through, kind of through something that you went through. It's almost like we feel like we don't deserve that.
Yeah.
But I guess I would encourage anyone going through a hard time, really of any kind, that you do deserve to feel better, that you do deserve help to get through it, and that there are better times ahead. And I guess I did the same thing when I was going through probably my worst. I thought about having a drink because, in the movies, that's what cowboys do when they get shot, and they don't have medicine, and they're like, well, they'll drink this whiskey and they'll feel better. It's almost a machismo thing, or you actually believe into the lie that it's going to help you feel better. But I just knew me. And I said, if I pick up this bottle, I'm never going to put it down. So be cautious about that sort of thing, even if you're not prone to habits like that. I think that those things could be helpful. So you've changed departments, you've moved on to greener pastures, I hope. What's happening for you now? What is your life like now? Maybe talk about some of the things that have happened to you since then, so that if someone's going through this right now, or if someone's looking at you and they want to know what happens to police officers who go through this, what's happened since all this ended, since you were cleared.
So I was cleared, and I go back, and just real quick before the now, and in my continued decision-making process to leave my department, I go back, and the first time I see the commander of my department, speaking of, anybody above a sergeant can often be, a changed person. First time I see the commander of my department, he sits me down, doesn't ask, hey, how you doing? Welcome back. None of that. It was, oh yeah, we got to talk about your punishment for the crash you were in 2 years ago. So I was like, at that point, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm, definitely leaving. When you have that kind of reaction, there's just no support. And so,
I'm not surprised. Ella French was murdered in the line of duty, and she was posthumously docked like 2 days of pay for something.
Yeah.
I'm just utterly not surprised by that at all. See, it'd be one thing if the commander sits down and he goes like, "This is not comfortable. We have to deal with this. But you got into a crash, and so we need the administrative remedy for this. I'm going to sentence you to time served through everything that you went through,
Right.
and I'm closing the book on this."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I guess he still had to mete out some sort of punishment for you after that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was frustrating. I was like, okay, yeah, I had already applied to the current department I'm with, but that really sealed it. Up until then, I was still kind of like, well, maybe, because there's something about being in what and yeah, almost like a bad relationship.
Right.
Yeah,
A little bit abusive there. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
everything that you just suffered through, and that you did everything right, and that you're still having to deal with that. It's a bit ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. So, I eventually did get hired by a different department, and it's been good. There's so much less stress, so much less, you know, worry from up above, and no department's going to be perfect. That's for sure. But I'm closer to home. I'm working with people who seem to really, actually be more positive on the daily, as opposed to the old department I was working at where it just seemed like morale was dropping and ever falling, uh, into the abyss is what it seemed like. And so, new department, get to start over, and already know the job, so that's been nice, and they've treated me like they can tell I know the job, which has been good. But it's just been overall a positive thing for my family, for you know even going back to my old apartment after I was cleared. It still was a stressor on my wife. You're going back to these people who didn't support you, and what if something like this happened again? And that was another thing I didn't want, is that if I get into another situation like that, do I want my last thought before I decide what I'm going to do? Well, am I going to get another 9 months off? And so I didn't want that to be, hold me back from what I have to do. And now at my new department, I don't have to. I, I know people who have gone through the OIS process with my new department, um, and every one of them has said it's been pretty easy and smooth, and they get back to work in a reasonable amount of time. And if they even when it's time to come back, the department says, "Hey, are you good to come back, or do you need a little bit more time?" And then it's in their court. So it's overall, I mean, for anybody out there who is in a department that really, you get that abusive relationship, domestic violence almost vibes from your job. Uh, I was several years in, and I don't regret making the decision to leave. So
You know, I think it's amazing that you call it almost a domestic violence type situation, because people in domestic violence situations don't leave them.
yeah,
They can be an abuse. And when you are on a police officer on scene, I can't imagine the number of times you've seen this, but you'll see two people in a domestic situation and you're just like, just leave each other, never see each other ever again.
yeah,
And all of your problems are solved. But it's that same way when a job. I mean, I've had toxic jobs before too, where this job's obviously a bad idea. You can tell that you're not enjoying yourself, that you're having a bad time there, that you're headed towards some kind of catastrophe, that you really are not getting the job satisfaction that you would hope for, but that you still don't leave. When you were on your 9 months of house arrest, did you ever imagine yourself as being put into the position where like your certification is taken, or you're no longer a police officer and you have to try to figure out life outside of being a police officer?
oh, absolutely. You got the criminal side of it, and then you got the administrative side of it. And even if I was cleared criminally, I still had to wait for that administrative, the IA portion of it, to go through. And if I was cleared criminally, but the IA said, "Hey, we believe that you used excessive force in this, and you shouldn't have shot him," there goes my job. There goes my certification. if I'm fired for using lethal force when an agency said that I should not have, I will never work as a cop again. And so I did have all that weighing on me too. It was a, not only am I facing the possibility of the legal side, but I'm facing a possibility that even if I'm cleared there, that worst case scenario from an administrative side is I would never work as a police officer again, and then I need to completely reinvent and find a new career. I'm like, oh, okay, well, here we go.
And you have stakeholders. You have your family to take care of and feed, and bills that are coming due. I mean, it's not just some quest to reimagine yourself. It's there's people that are going to suffer in the meantime. So I can't imagine what you went through. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention in terms of what happened to you, or any other insights that you wish people would know?
I just want people to realize, because it's this common myth that we get into a shooting and then we're just given a vacation, that there is some sort of incentive for us to get into a shooting. I've had people say, well, in this place, the union gives them this amount of money if they get into a shooting, and people need to understand that's not what it's for. It's not a incentive. It is you're put out to pasture, what it feels like for months. You don't have any access to overtime, so you don't what you normally might bring in overtime, you don't have access to that. You're put out on your own. Any extra bills or anything like that comes up, you have no way to pay for it because you can't get an extra job. So this is not a vacation. It is something that, and I don't want to be all, oh, we're the greatest people ever, but it is something that we know that we may have to do at some point in our careers, and hope we don't, but we are willing to do it despite all that comes along with it. So it is not a vacation. It is not something that we want to happen, but it is a side effect of, what can happen. And it's not what all these people make it out to be, as far as, oh, this fun time.
I think that's a huge understatement, and you can tell that that people don't get that at all, because first of all that falls under the shadow of what happens to the guy that died. Never mind that he's the one that decided to get naked, pick up a gun, and rather than escorting old ladies across the street to the library, which is another way he could have spent his day. But whenever you see comments on social media for how we need to end qualified immunity for police officers, the response from me is always straightforward. I'm like, oh, do you really think that another human being should put his pension, his job, his freedom on the line to answer your call because you're having a bad day? Watch as you dial 911 and nobody comes if you end qualified immunity. But it just completely explains that they have no idea the risks that you take on as a police officer, just inherently, from day one, the things that you're exposing yourself to. And not to minimize your case, but I mean, yours is really a happy story. You're kind of somebody who went through all that and got through to the other side. I mentioned some other guys who ended up wrongfully, spending some time in prison, which is pretty horrifying. So I think it's not to be downplayed. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and out of your life to tell your story. This is certainly something that's, your business. It's your family's business. But I hope that someone listening to this got something out of it in terms of understanding that police officers are human beings who take on a tremendous risk to do a job that you said you love. I think that's I think it's wonderful that we have people who love doing this job and that are willing to take on the risks for everyone else. And it's really what makes everything possible. And you guys, of course, get zero credit. So thank you for the work that you did. Thank you for keeping people safe that night when you had to take that guy's life. And I appreciate everything that you did to get through it. And I appreciate that you're still a police officer. Me, I would have figured out something else to do. I guess I'm just not that vested. So I appreciate that you get that strength of character. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk.
If you watched all the way to the end, I want to say thank you for watching this special episode of the Comm Center. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And most importantly, leave a comment in the comments section below. I'll respond to those comments. And consider becoming a member and checking out our back catalog so that you can see even more great content just like this.
911 emergency, police or paramedics.
He's going westbound on foot. Westbound on foot. There we go.